To become is a lifelong process. Nothing is constant, not even the self. We evolve in the midst of narratives meant only for some and ways of being made narrow by fear and power. We must then have the courage to listen to the truth of our own lives, to the wisdom that comes from within, responding without resistance or need to control, but with welcome and curiosity. This is what ensures our becoming is an unfolding of our truest self. This lifelong labor cannot be carried out alone. It requires help from friends and lovers, family and creaturely companions who bear witness to what makes us come alive and say to us, listen, look, feel, pay attention to that. When I first saw this litany for becoming in this month's packet of resources for the Soul Matters theme of becoming, I was intrigued by the name of the author. The attribution was simply given as enfleshed, and that is spelled, I might add, with a lowercase e. So I had to find out more about who or what enfleshed actually is. According to their website, Enfleshed creates and facilitates spiritual resources for collective liberation through prayer, liturgies, art, meditations, teaching, and other resources. They continue. Our work is largely positioned within Christian-adjacent communities, centering the wisdom, experiences, and desires of those traditionally on the fringes of dominant institutions, theologies, and politics. Our values align with the poets, the healers, the truth-tellers, the tender and fierce, the messy and untidy, the seekers, the queer, and the strange ones across spiritual traditions. Inviting transformation, internal, material, and collective, we share offerings of non-conforming embodiments of faith, ancient and unfolding. With attention to the sacred in the flesh of the earth and all creaturely forms, they conclude, we find God in the entangled, fleeting, beautiful, and aching nature of this one wild and precious life. And at the end, of course, they're quoting the UU-adjacent poet Mary Oliver from her poem, The Summer Day. There's a lot of words in this description of enfleshed, but for me, it's all about a form of spirituality that is quite the opposite of any rigid idea of religion. Enfleshed rejects dogma, traditional authority, and anything resembling definitions of the way things are supposed to be. This is spirituality set free, a process of growth and inevitable change, rather than anything locked down and fixed forever and ever, world without end. Amen. Let me reread one of Enfleshed's sentences describing themselves. Inviting transformation, internal, material, and collective, we share offerings of non-conforming embodiments of faith, ancient and unfolding. In other words, Enfleshed's view of spirituality is inherently transformative, more informed by all the possibilities of what we might discover and rediscover, of all that we might become. So it's not surprising that Enfleshed's Litany for Becoming made it into the Soul Matters packet for this month's theme of becoming. Their litany is a good summary of their philosophy that spirituality is not static, but dynamic. It's not about being, rather it's about becoming. Nothing is constant, not even the self. Or, as Leah Morris sang, there is nothing, no thing that ever stays the same. That's the one thing that life can guarantee. From this opening assertion, Enfleshed Litany talks about the stories that compete to guide our becoming. There are all of the oughts and the shoulds and the supposed to be's that can come at us from so many places: families of origin, society, our apparent race and gender, our workplaces, the television. And then there are our own stories, the stories we tell about who we are and who we are becoming. Those are the stories that really matter once we find our own voices to tell them, Because, as Morris sang, no one knows who I will be as I keep becoming me. Finding our own voices, telling our own stories, well, those are important parts of figuring out what we will do with our one wild and precious life. But, Infleshed reminds us, we don't do it alone. Indeed, we can't do it alone. That's why there's so much value in programs for spiritual growth and self-discovery, like Sacred Language and Sacred Translation, that Rebecca Wheeler and I are co-leading this spring. As we're realizing with this particular program, for instance, spending time with other people to share how we experience and understand the world, struggling to put those experiences and understandings into words, learning how multifaceted and polyvalent all those words can be, and yet finding commonality in those struggles and lessons. That's an invaluable part of acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, as our third principle puts it. Going on this journey with other people isn't just a means to an end, it's the whole point. As Infleshed's Litany for Becoming reminds us, this is loving and being loved. Telling the stories, sharing in the memories, giving thanks for the relationships, understandings, and experiences past that have shaped us to this day. It's been almost 11 years since I was called by this congregation to be your minister, and what a journey we've been on together. We've weathered hurricanes, an earthquake, a flooded building, and a completely blocked sewer line. We've celebrated births, and we've grieved deaths. We honored our history when the congregation turned 60, and we embraced our future with a new pulpit, a new UUFP symbol, and a decision to look for and move to a new, more mission-appropriate property. You ordained me, you dedicated my daughter, and together we've celebrated 11 years of water communions, flower communions, and Christmas Eves, all with only one incident of hair catching on fire from all of the candles. And the journey continues, of course. As you heard this morning, we've had our most successful canvas ever, which sets us up for so well what comes next. Thank you, Finance Committee and stewards, and everybody who helped make this possible. 13 months ago, we very quickly moved services and other programming to Zoom because, well, really we had no choice. Now, as more and more of us are getting vaccinated, and we can more optimistically look forward to the end of the pandemic, we can start talking about what it will mean to return to in-person programming. But there's a lot we need to figure out. We need to continue offering online programming too. And then there are all the questions of what we can safely do in person. When is singing together okay? When are potlucks okay? When is hugging okay? I know we'll figure it all out. I know we'll come through this stronger and more compassionate and better able to challenge the world because we're on this journey together, and this is loving and being loved. Celebrating new beginnings that excite, holding risks together, leaning into unknowns with the promises of support and companionship. Well, that piece of the Litany for Becoming certainly describes who we're becoming now. A new location, a new property, a new building. That's both exciting and risky. We're definitely leaning into unknowns in a big way, and of course that's pushing us to the edge or even outside of our comfort zones. It's not something we've done as a congregation in a long, long time. And the last couple of times we did it, we had no choice, thanks to either eminent domain or a devastating fire. This time, by contrast, we've grasped our own destiny by choosing to make this move for our own reasons. And I say that this is both exciting and risky because, like most things in life, it's both and, not either or. There's risk in a move because there's so much that we don't know. From finding the right property to raising the money we'll need to buy it and make it ours. From everything that could go wrong in a move to what we might discover about ourselves in a different space. And there's also excitement for precisely the same reason, because there's so much that we don't know. What could we do with that new space that we can't even imagine doing until we see it? What might we learn about ourselves that lets us be who we truly want to be? Who, like Mark Hewitt, will we meet along the way, giving us support and companionship for our journey together? One thing we know, when it comes to working through the excitement and the risk together, knowing that we are doing it together reminds us that this is loving and being loved. Listening to the future calling uniquely to each of us in the midst of all of life's noise. Helping one another find our place in the shared labor of collective life. Supporting each other in what it is the world's ache is asking from us. I've realized over the years that my answer to pretty much every problem is basically community. I firmly believe that there's nothing we can't do if we work together. And I firmly believe that Unitarian Universalism can teach us how to do that thanks to the power and flexibility of our covenantal theology, if only we dare to tap into it. That's easier said than done, of course, so I offer you the opening lines of another Mary Oliver poem, Wild Geese. She writes, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine." For the world's ache is asking something of us, but we can't respond by ourselves. It's too much. We can only do it if we support one another, recognizing that what each of us can do is good enough, and it's good enough because we're not the only ones doing it. And it starts by letting the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And it grows when we remind one another that that's okay, that this is loving and being loved. To say for the first time, this is who I am. This is the truth of my body. This is what I know about myself. This is my name, and this is where my path is leading me. And to have it heard, have it received, have it affirmed, and then to say it again and again as we change and as the world changes, and to have each proclamation greeted with an open-armed embrace. One of the reasons I believe that my answer to pretty much every problem is basically community is that who we are together is the context for who we are becoming individually. Our first principle sets the stage for this, reminding us of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, which is our modern expression of Universalist theology. Note that our first principle is about the inherent worth and dignity of every person, not the worth and dignity of every behavior. And that's because at its best, the congregation is a safe space. No, a brave space, where each of us can work out where we have come from, what we are, and where we are going. And that's essential if we are to love ourselves, because only then will we know our true selves. As Leah Morris sang, our beginnings don't determine our lives, and nobody else can tell us what paths to take. So it's up to us to be open and curious and flexible so that we can embrace and love our true selves. That's hardly an easy task, of course, so it's not only best, but also pretty much essential to take that journey of self-discovery with companions who can hear, receive, and affirm what we are discovering. And though we are apart physically, that doesn't mean that we're alone. Whenever we connect, however we connect, we are still loving one another into being, loving one another into becoming real. And this comes back to what the world's ache is asking of us too. I learned yesterday a quote from the author and activist Grace Lee Boggs, who said that in order to transform the world, we must transform ourselves. To put it another way, to love your neighbor as yourself, you have to love yourself first in order to be able to love others in that way. We can't respond to the world's ache. We can't answer the future's call until we know where we are and what we are becoming. And this too is loving and being loved. There is no me without you. We shape one another. The sacred that birthed us weaves our lives together so that we can only find ourselves through shared becoming. For my journey and all its winding ways, for yours, for all the saints who labored for what is, all the kin whose lives made ours possible, for all those yet to come for whom living our truths today will mean breaking possibilities open for them tomorrow. We pause. We give thanks. We acknowledge. One of the truths that this pandemic has brought home, at least for those who are willing to open themselves to it, is that we're all in this together. As others have noted, though, the this that we're all in is not a boat. We're not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. It's a terrible storm, to be sure, but some people's boats are up to the task of protecting them and keeping them safe. Many other people's boats, however, are not. They're taking in water and they're sinking. So if we're all in this storm together, and our covenantal theology and our community ethic insists that we get through it together, but not all of our boats are sufficiently seaworthy, then that means we need to do something. It means we need to help fix one another's boats, because nobody should be taking in water even in good weather. It means we need to help upgrade one another's boats, because nobody should be sunk by just one rough wave. It means helping one another make our boats seaworthy. And yes, that means allowing ourselves to be helped by others when we need help too. For indeed, this is loving and being loved. May it be so.